Morning Chats with James and Sarah.
And Bane.
Rolling Conversations podcast. You had thought about it the other day, but you were nervous because you were like...
Well, no, because I don't feel like why does anybody want to learn anything from me? You know what I'm saying? Like, what makes somebody want to... For one, why did the guy reach out to me? I'm no one. I have no following. I have no... anything. But then, what am I going to teach people? Like I said before, I'm a regurgitation of what I've learned in class or what you've shown me or whatever. So I feel like a fraud almost. Like I don't have a game. I don't have any spectacular, move or I don't know. I don't have anything. I mean, other than putting people in gift wraps every single time that we roll. You know what I mean? And like, I don't have anything.
But you don't think it would be helpful for maybe another female who's just starting out, who's a little nervous?
Yeah, but that's not what the guy asked. He wanted five separate techniques taught, step by step in like a 2 to 3 minute video. You know what I mean? I don't think the basis for anything is to be helpful to women who are starting out. I think it's just because he needed more women on his platform that are teaching techniques, but like I'm a old purple belt that I don't know. I guess it's like how you talked about the imposter syndrome. Like that's what I feel like. Like who am I to teach anybody anything? Just like whenever like girls have asked me, either people who don't train at all and they want to learn something before they do come in the gym, or women that are in the gym that want a little extra help, and they're like, hey, can you work with me, or can you this, or can you that? And I'm like, why do you want me? I can't teach you anything. That's how I feel. I feel like I don't feel like I'm in a position or have the credibility to teach anyone anything.
Yeah, but just because the guy...
All I ever put on my Instagram or TikTok or whatever is like funny shit. I'm not... Nobody's learning shit from my social media. Let's be for real.
Yeah, but just because the guy reached out to you for whatever reason, whether it's him wanting to have more females on his platform doing instructionals, doesn't mean that you can't do it for what you think females in jiu-jitsu would benefit from.
But there's female black belts all over the place who have way more to say and way more to give than a lowly old, purple belt that has zero following whatsoever.
I don't think it's about the following. I think it's about your personality, your relatability, and just like this pod.
For all the other old ladies that do jiu-jitsu, is that what you're saying?
It's for the average woman, like think about it just from our podcast. Our podcast wants to be, the idea, or the original idea behind it was like we're all we see on YouTube and other platforms is the 1% of the athletes, the Gordon Ryans, the Craig Jones, the Rotolo brothers.
I think Craig Jones would rather be in the 2%.
Yeah, Craig Jones is 2%, not 1%. But, like you might be more relatable to the mass amount of females who are starting in jiu-jitsu. Like, I think, like me personally, I I relate more to someone like me than I do to somebody else.
Yeah, I know,
You know
but
what I
I
mean?
don't think instructionals are necessarily about relatability. It's about credibility. And what kind of credibility do I have? You know? I mean, unless it's just like, oh, like the draw is here's just a regular woman.
I think that is. I think right now jiu-jitsu and a lot of the higher level competitors and coaches are trying to do the Conor McGregor of jiu-jitsu, the Gordon Ryan of jiu-jitsu, to make themselves seem like this bigger than life personality, and like
Well, that's exhausting, though.
it is. And it's like for some people, like I don't, I'm distracted by that. Like if I'm trying to research a technique or a move or something like that, I have some people I go to, but a lot of times it's a random video of a, there's a lot of good coaches out there that don't get the recognition or the credit that they deserve because
Right,
they're,
but like I'm not a coach either.
yeah, but I'm saying in general, like they don't get the recognition because they're not constantly self-promoting. They made a video because they wanted to make a video, and
Yeah.
so I think I think you should do it. And um, you know, talking about imposter syndrome, you know how long I've been doing this, right?
Yeah, I know.
I've coached people from the smallest local little shows all the way to Bellator, like been to the UFC, like all of that. But last night, Hoffa was in the gym, and you gonna coach? No, this is your class. I was nervous last night coaching with Hoffa there because
That's funny.
I still feel the same way, like the imposter syndrome. Like whenever I got my black belt, when I got my black belt, I had been training 20, 23 years whenever I got my black belt. That's 23 years of fighting, being a student, being a fighter, being a gym owner. You want to talk about imposter syndrome? Whenever I first opened the school,
Yeah, I know.
like I felt like the biggest fake, the biggest phony. Like, and I felt like why should I have a school? But at the time, Berto felt it was the right time, the right opportunity, and I was the right person to branch out and do it. But even whenever I got my black belt, like I said, 23 years doing this, I felt like a fake. Like,
No,
am
I
I
remember. I
am,
remember
am I a
talking
black
about
belt?
it
And
at home.
you know, and just like anything else, like you can hide from it, or you can embrace it and just let your work speak for itself. Like I know I was whenever I got mine, I was
That's a woodpecker.
whenever I got mine, um, I was 45 or 46, and I was like, man, I I'm not gonna be able to I'm not gonna be able to prove or share or do what I know I could do in my head 10 years ago.
Yeah, but you
But
were already doing, like, to me, the whole black belt thing is about passing on what you've learned over the grind of your your journey to a black belt.
Yeah.
And I think that's whenever like people are starting jujitsu, and especially the younger guys who compete all the time, and they, they're worried about that next belt or this or that, and then they see a black belt, like an older black belt, which you're not old, but you are an older black belt, because it seems like all the black belts that you see everywhere these days are, you know,
Mid to late 20.
25 to 30 years old, and like that's awesome. They've been training since they were kids. Like, I'm not discrediting anything, but I mean, a young competitive blue belt is, I mean, you're 49 years old.
About to be 50.
Yeah. But, so, like, you have a young competitive blue belt, and, like, you don't match that energy. Like, that. And I'm not saying that you don't handle it. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying, like, there's different approaches to jujitsu, I guess. But it's not about, I don't think it's about, like, smashing everyone all the time. I think when you get to a certain level, like, it's about what you're passing on. Like, what you learned throughout your journey to black belt and your ability to pass it on.
No.
Which, whenever we talk about doing these instructionals, that's where I say, what do I have to pass on? Like, and why do I don't know, why should I pass anything on right now?
No, I mean, I see it, but I think you're devaluing you.
Are you using my words against me?
But I think you are devaluing yourself a little bit. And if you come, like, some of the worst instructionals are the ones that, like, these guys show these 8-step moves that require your opponent or partner to basically just
Be
lay
a dead
there
fish.
and not move. Like, those are the worst. They're almost
Yeah.
comical because
Yeah.
it's like,
Well, and they're everywhere.
yeah, and it's almost like, all right, let me see you actually do that in
Right.
live rolling or in competition. And then on the other spectrum, the other ones are so boring because it's like, okay, this is how you do an Americana. Like, those techniques are great and they're fundamental for developing jiu-jitsu, but the personality doesn't come out, and it's
Yeah, but then on the other side of that, whenever you have people who, like, do have a good personality, I feel like they're always showing some parkour version of jiu-jitsu that, like, 0.05% of the population can pull off this, front triple twist into a berimbolo to take the back to do a whatever 10th planet name you have for the movement. And it's like, yeah, that's never going to happen for me,
and that's why I'm saying you should do the instructionals, because I think if you, one, you're very relatable, like, you have a great personality, but like I was saying a minute ago, the instructionals that I like are from someone that's they're practical, and it's from the point of view of, like, I've done this and this works for me. It may not work for you. The ones that I don't like are, I hit this every single time, or
I've been doing this to everybody.
Or it's, if you do this, you will win. It will be successful. No.
Right.
And I think if you do it from your vantage point, from your point of view of, like, I'm a 40-year-old
150-pound woman that
purple
only
belt
yeah
that primarily only rolls with one or two women and the rest are men, this is what I do, this is what works for me. Like, not every female that's doing jiu-jitsu has a gym, a room full of women to train with. They're training with men, and they're struggling because, unfortunately, 98% of the people in jiu-jitsu class typically are going to be men, and the male coaches, myself included, don't always know how to coach to a woman.
Right.
You know, so like I show, I personally show fundamental techniques that are effective, that put you in good opportunities for other things. But from a male point of view, like it, you may not, as a female, be able to have the same success against, you know, a larger man. And
Yeah.
I think, you know, there's things that you do really well, and I think there's things that work really well for you, whether it's a female, a male, regardless of the size. And I think if you help share that with other women, I think it'll go a long way. You know, regardless of your following or your accolades or whatever you have or don't have, I think your perspective and point of view is the value of you doing the video. You know?
Yeah.
Just like what'd you say whenever you got your purple belt? How did you feel?
Oh. No, I didn't. I didn't think that I mean, I definitely didn't think that I was ready, but I think if you think that you are, like, I don't know. I definitely didn't think I was ready, even though I know that, like, I mean, I don't know. I didn't think that I was ready for it.
And how do you feel now?
I
Would you say you've grown in?
some days I'm like, what the hell am I doing? But no, I do think I've grown into it. I do think that I see jiu-jitsu almost completely different than I did a year ago, which is hilarious to me because I mean, I know I always say that I don't necessarily have a game, but I think people that I roll with regularly would say that I probably do. You know, have like a certain style about me. I always end up in certain positions or certain. I'm always trying to get your friend back. But I don't know. I think that I've grown into it for sure in the last year, but I also think that I've been a little bit more dedicated to jiu-jitsu in the last year than I have in all of the years prior.
But
Or not, maybe not more dedicated, but more focused on technique, or maybe it's just starting to make sense, all of the
well,
years
that's what I was
coming
gonna
together.
say. Maybe it's just starting to click, and that's what.
The jiu-jitsu starting to make sense to me rather than it
Well,
just be putting my limbs in places where I'm supposed to put them.
well, also that's a purple belt. You know, white belt, you learn to survive. You try not to be pinned. You try not to be submitted. Blue belt, you just get better at those things and maybe start working on some submissions and setups on the white belts, and then start advancing your technique. And by the time you get to purple belt, you have a good fundamental understanding of jiu-jitsu. You're actually comprehending and not only starting to retain but starting to remember those techniques you were shown in white and blue belt that you may not have been shown, that may pop up, that may start clicking for you now.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're really learning jiu-jitsu at purple belt, but you're kind of remembering the things you were taught white and blue, and now you're finally at a point to where you can start really like implementing those and putting those into play. And then you say you don't have a game, but very few purple belts have a game. Like now you're at a spot where you start developing your game, and I hate that word, that your game in jiu-jitsu. It's just what's successful for you.
Yeah.
Like I'm never going to be doing inverted guard or barambolos and shit like that, but I have a fundamental understanding of them.
Right.
You know, so it's not that, you know, it's where it's like the purple belt. Like they say you start developing your game. It's just you start understanding what works for you and what you have success with, and then you're able to successfully implement it in your rounds.
Yeah.
That it's not developing a game. Like, it's not football. You're not putting together a scheme or, you know, a run play, a pass play, or certain type of defenses. It's like what works.
Yeah.
You know, regardless. Yeah. You're starting to understand. You and most purple belts that are a year or two into the purple belt start understanding, like, okay, I'm in this position. Now you start understanding, like, if you break it down to, in this position, I'm going to go for 3 options. And those 3 options are typically, like, what you've had success with.
Yeah.
And you start going to those more and more and more, and you start having success.
And then developing off of those things.
Yeah, and then you start understanding, like, okay, I'm going down this path. Every path, there's going to be at least one fork in the road. And then you start knowing, I'm on this path, but now I know the fork is in the road. So you're in this path, and you're like, okay, I'm just waiting for that fork. And when that fork comes, I'm taking 1 or 2. So purple belts, their decision making starts happening a lot quicker, a lot less thought. Like, you're not having to stop and think. You're thinking on the fly. You've actually developed muscle memory by this time. And that's why people think they've developed a game. No, you're just learning jiu-jitsu.
Like, the whole time that we're sitting here talking about this, I'm thinking about it as, like, the language of jiu-jitsu. Like, a white belt is, like, your first day of, like, Spanish 1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're learning the, like, verbs or nouns or whatever. And, like, now it's like, oh, I can form sentences in jiu-jitsu. And maybe at brown belt, I can have a conversation. And then when you get to where you're at, you're fluent in jiu-jitsu. But there's always shit to learn.
But I'm not fluent in fucking English.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess I never...
I'm still learning punctuation.
Yeah, shit. Spelling.
Autocorrect. I wish there was autocorrect for jiu-jitsu.
Oh, shit, me too. Yeah, but no, I think you're right, and I have noticed, especially whenever I get put into, like, situations, I know that I'm, like, recalling stuff. It's like my filing cabinet of jiu-jitsu is starting to be, or it's starting to get organized, I think, where, you know, over the years you learn all of these different techniques, and, you know, different seminars and different coaches give you these different tips and tricks, and I know a lot of the coaches that I've had are all, you know, bigger guys, and so I have learned a lot of big guy game, which big guy game doesn't always work for the little guy, you know. But I mean, it now that you're saying it like that, like even last night, getting put put into a head and arm, and then I just recalled stuff that we had talked about before, escaping that, different things that we've done, and it's like automatically my brain starts to, you know, put these different things, line them up. If I do this, I'm giving up my back, but then I have to be ready for this, and then this, and then this, and then, but it's not the same as it was before, where I'm literally used to think in my head, okay, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think it's more of like you're saying, it's like a pathway. Well, I know where this road goes, and I know that there are different turns in this road, and it's whichever way I want to turn is going to take me to wherever. So,
Yeah, and
I think you're right.
And I've said that forever. Like, jiu-jitsu is taught 1, 2, 3, 4.
He just put the ball in the pool on purpose. And now he's staring at it. Yeah, but
jiu-jitsu is taught 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's taught that way because it's easier to coach large groups that way.
Yeah.
But whenever, like, I've done privates or done smaller groups, I don't always coach it 1, 2, 3, 4, because if you're teaching things sequential in this path, in this order, like, advanced guys understand that
it's a concept.
You got to understand the concepts. You got to understand it's fluid. You've got to have creativity. Like, people that are really successful in jiu-jitsu, if you really pay attention to them, they're actually very creative with it. Like, there's some guys that roll and they make shit their own. Like, they were taught a move by somebody, but then they make it their own.
But do they make it their own over time? They don't make it their own straight away.
No, it's over time. And
and I think I'm starting to understand that now.
Yeah.
You know, like it is I do think for the first several years of jiu-jitsu, you do see everything in steps. And then you get to a point and you're like, shit, what do I do from here? And I think the shit, what do I do from here starts to go away, and you just start to create this flow of, it's just everything is a constant transition. Whether it's from shitty position to shitty position to shitty position, it's like just not stopping anymore and just letting it flow into whatever the next opportunity is. And if that opportunity is just another opportunity to survive longer, which most of the time it is for me, I mean, I guess, yeah, maybe I am getting a little better at jiu-jitsu. A little.
You know, everybody talks about the beginning, like drinking water from a fire hose, you know?
Oh.
I've never really, every time I hear that, I just chuckle, because in my mind it's, you know, when you're a white belt, you're taking 10 pounds of shit and putting it into a 2-pound bag. Well, when you're a blue belt, you're taking 10 pounds of shit and putting it into a 4-pound bag. And when you're a purple belt, you're taking 10 pounds of shit and putting it into, you know, a 6 or 8, 10 pound bag. So it's not that, like, you're able to start drinking more water. It's just your capacity for what's being taught, your retention, your understanding, and your implementation of it gets better over time.
Yeah.
Like, if you think about how many times you've been shown an armbar from guard, and then think about how many times you've hit an armbar from guard. Like, it, you know, it's very difficult, you know, and it's...
Well, I mean, because that's one of those fundamental movements that everybody's shown, and everybody's shown how to...
Well, everyone's sensitive to it and hyper aware of it, you know, like, and then when you actually finish an armbar, you know, people do finish armbars from guard, but when it's an advanced higher belt and another advanced higher belt, normally when they're getting finished with an armbar, there's 3 or 4 positional exchanges that happen before that armbar happens. Like, I was rolling the other night and I got finished in an arm lock, but the transition, like, I'm trying to think of how many transition it actually happened from me attacking the person I was rolling with, defending the attack. There was such a transitional exchange that by the time I got caught in the arm lock, like, there were so many positional exchanges that, like, but if you're not taught fundamentally the mechanics, the understanding of the arm lock, you're never going to be able to finish it.
Right.
The hard part is the setup, the entries, the transitions to how to bait and things like that. And that's the advanced part of jiu-jitsu. That's really hard to teach, especially white and blue belts, and that's where,
more time on the mat and
more time on the mat, open mats, positional grappling. Positional grappling is great, I think. Like drilling, and not drilling where you're in someone's guard and they're doing leg,
and hoping to God they're not a wet noodle.
And they're doing windmills. Like that's more of learning how to move your hips, learning how to keep your head off the mat, learning grips than it is about the actual finish of the armbar. But I think it's a really cool opportunity that someone reached out to ask you for an instructional, and you don't have to show an armbar from guard. I think you show. I
would not.
I think you show things that work for you because, and you can always tell in instructional videos when someone's instructing something that either they don't do or they don't understand. It's so transparent.
Well, it's like that in classes too.
Yeah.
I feel like I can always tell whenever somebody watched a video earlier in the day, thought that the technique was really badass, and was like, I'm going to show that to somebody in class.
And you hear the words that they're using.
Yeah.
It's
something that they don't, it's not even something that they use.
Well, not just that, but you can tell, like, the way that their speech patterns, their coaching patterns, it's like, that's not normal.
Yeah.
But I think it'll come off more personal, more relatable, and more realistic if this is what works for me. This is what I use, when rolling with larger guys.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's a great experience just to walk through the motions of actually saying things out loud. Like, you coached for so many years in CrossFit. Like, think about when you coach CrossFit. When you were coaching movements and things like that, you knew how to physically do it, but you got a better understanding of the movement, why you were doing it, when you were saying it out loud and breaking it down,
Yeah.
And there's two things happen to people when they start, and I'm not talking about the instructional, I'm talking about coaching now. Two things I've noticed that happens when people start coaching early, whether it's helping out with, other classes or whatever, and they're in white, purple belts, and even some brown belts that have never coached. Like, one of two things happen. They get an ego because they're a coach and they don't want to roll with their students, and they don't want to be submitted by their students, or the light switch goes off, and it's like, I am saying this because I heard it said to me so many times that I know I have to repeat it, but why am I saying this? Like, why am I saying I need to control posture, I need to control the arm, I need to have my hips off the mat, my head needs to be off? Like, why am I saying that? Now I understand why.
Yeah.
So, like, the second one is when someone starts coaching, they start understanding jiu-jitsu really well, and then you see their progression go through the roof. You see them just all of a sudden advance and start taking off, because it's like they've shown stuff and they've done stuff out of repetition and muscle memory, but now they understand. So I understand if I want to do an arm lock, I'm not going to be constantly focused on like a wrist grip. I understand, like, if I hold someone's wrist, their entire arm can still move. If I want to attack the arm, maybe I need to be at the elbow or down to the shoulder.
Yeah, kind of like what we were talking about with the legs last night.
Yeah. Like, if you're trying to do a leg lock and all you're doing is grabbing the toes and you're not securing the thigh and the hip, like, the leg's gonna move. You're connected, but you don't have control.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that's one of two things I've seen typically, is that, or there is a third. They're like, fuck this, I don't want to coach. That happens too, but but normally it's one or two. And to be quite honest, like whenever I first opened my school, I was the first. I was coaching all these new people, and at first, I was still training, I was still competing, and I had a giant school of brand new people with a couple of buddies that came over.
Yeah.
So I'd roll with my buddies, and then I just would smash all these new people. Well, once the new people started getting better and getting better, looking back, I was that first guy that was like, maybe I shouldn't roll because this guy's too new and he's getting too good, so I'm just going to coach him. And then I became that guy that would coach in the middle of a round when a lower belt or a less experienced person would start getting an advantage on me. So I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to get out of that, to just put that ego aside, like, and realize, like, that's jiu-jitsu for one. And if you're a really good coach, it took me a couple years to learn this. Like, if I'm a good coach, my guys should catch me, pass me, and be looking, beyond me. Like, it took a long time for that, and I was very stuck and stagnant for a long time. And then when it finally clicked, like, I started reaching out to other people. If you remember, I started reaching out to Rob Kahn, Marcelo Menez, Sam Kimmel, Hoffa, like those people, Danny Ruiz, Paul, old student of mine, Paul, like, surpassed Bamboo, like, all those people surpassed me. And then my ego kept me here, and it took a few years for me to be like, okay, not that some of those guys were my student, like, some of those people were always way ahead of me, but it took me reaching out to those people to be like, and to realize, like, jiu-jitsu is a forever student. Like, you're never gonna know jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You just, when you think you know jiu-jitsu, it's like, bitch, guess what? So, like, it took a long time for me to get that ego out of the way. And then now, like, I love it whenever new guys pass me or catch me or whatever. Like that's a sense of pride for me. Is like, I coached this guy so well, he's now beating me.
Yeah.
He's taking my knowledge, making it his own, and he's passing me.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the goal of any coach. And if it's not, that coach has too much of an ego.
Yeah.
So are you going to do it?
I'll think about it.
You'll think about it?
That's all I got.
That's all you got? That's it and that's all?
That's it and that's all. I love that movie.